afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this second of Eating Mindsets Facebook Live.
I didn't catch that. Could you?
I apologise, that's my phone, Siri picking up my voice. The second of this week's Facebook Lives from Eating Mindset, and we've been looking at the importance of good nutrition for protecting us from common everyday infectious diseases. And this was really prompted by some fake news and sort of rubbish that I've been seeing on the internet and on radio and TV about the role of nutrition in fighting coronavirus, and I just thought I'd put some facts out there. So yesterday we looked at the importance of maintaining a healthy weight, and if there's interest, then next week I might do a whole series on how you could help your family shift their eating mindset, how you can talk to your family in a really positive and constructive way about the importance of a healthy weight. So if you would be interested in that, then do stick a note on the Facebook page, Eating Mindset, so that I can kind of judge levels of interest. But today we're going to be talking about our guts and the importance of a healthy microbiome, a healthy gut microbiome. Now, I'm hoping this will be kind of useful for people who are doing a bit of homeschooling, but also for us parents and carers, just to get together and have a chat over something that connects us, that's of interest to all of us. So for those of you younger people who are doing a bit of homeschooling, you might have been asked to do a project, I know my children have, on biomes. So biomes are just habitats, basically. So your project might be for biology or for geography, looking at different habitats. And a really, really interesting habitat is our gut microbiome. Now, our microbiota, micro and then biota, is the name given to all of the organisms that live in our guts, and the organisms that can only be seen with a microscope, so they're micro, they're very tiny. And that would include things like bacteria, viruses, protozoa, yeasts, that kind of thing. And so my first question to those of you who are doing a little bit of homeschooling is, how many of these bugs do you think we have in our guts? So what's the total of our microbiota? How many different bugs do you think we have in our guts? That's the bacteria, viruses, protozoa, yeast, all the different microbes that we have in our guts. And I'm going to put the answer on the Eating Mindset page later today. So just have a little stab in the dark there, or if you know, then put your answer on my page. I haven't got any prizes, but I just thought it would be good to have a little bit of a competition. So your microbiota, which are the bugs that live in your gut, together with the stuff that those bugs produce, because they're living organisms, so they're going to produce stuff, and the environment they live in, that makes up your microbiome, your gut microbiome. And the exact composition of your microbiome is rather like your fingerprints. So it's absolutely unique to you. But one thing that's a little bit different to your fingerprint is that your microbiome changes a little bit all the time. And it changes a lot if you take antibiotics or if you change your diet significantly. And obviously I'll talk a lot more about nutrition later and why it's important for a strong and healthy gut microbiome. So what on earth does our microbiota do? And you know, we're learning heaps more about this all the time because it's an area where there's masses of research going on at the moment. But there's still a lot that we don't know, and we need to do a lot more research. But we do know that our microbiota provide us with digestive enzymes that allow us to break down fibre that we wouldn't otherwise be able to use for energy, because normally we can't break down fibre, but the bugs that live in our guts allow us to break down some of it. So I've got a question here for GCSE students. So I'd like you to think about naming a chemical that's produced in the gut by fermentation. So fermentation is the process by which the microbiota, the digestive enzymes in the microbiota, break down fibre in the gut. That's called fermentation. So what chemical products does that produce? And there's a clue, and that clue is that these chemical products are short-chain fatty acids. So just see if you can name a short-chain fatty acid. So again, put your answers on my page, and I'll pop the answer up at the end of the day. The other thing that our microbiota does is it provides essential vitamins, some of which we can't make ourselves, or we find it difficult to get enough in our diets. There are loads of vitamins that our microbiota produce for us, boosting up our levels of all sorts of B vitamins. But it also produces quite a bit of vitamin K, and that's really, really interesting, because when I've done analyses of my clients' diets over the years, vitamin K is one of the vitamins that's always quite low in the common UK diet. We get it from things like green leafy vegetables, and we don't tend to be too brain at eating a lot of those. And so it's quite good that our gut microbiota, if it's strong and healthy, can produce a fair bit of vitamin K for us. In fact, it's thought that it probably produces about half of what we actually need. So that's a really beneficial thing that it does for us. So some of the kids out there, you might be thinking, oh, that's really, really yucky. There's all these bugs living in our gut. It sounds absolutely revolting. It's like an episode of that program Operation Ouch, and we really don't want to think about these bugs living inside us. But they're really, really beneficial for us and for our health. And the final thing that the microbiota, the bugs living in our gut, do for us is it interacts with our hormonal and our neurological system, and it helps shape our whole physiology. And this is an area where there is so much research going on, and we're learning more and more every week that goes by, but there's still loads more to learn. But we know that it does things like reducing our risk of autoimmune diseases. It reduces our risk of type 1 diabetes. It can reduce our risk of getting things like depression, that's that sort of thing. It may have anti-inflammatory benefits, so it could reduce risk of things like inflammatory bowel disease. So there's all sorts of amazing potential really with our gut microbiota that we're trying to understand more and more about as the days go by. But it also boosts our immune system, which is what we're talking about today. So it helps us fight off the nasty bugs. So these bugs living in our gut are beneficial, but obviously not all bugs that live inside our bodies are beneficial. So E. coli is an example of a nasty bug, gives you really, really bad diarrhea. If you don't wash your hands properly after you've been to the loo, you may well pick up E. coli, and then you'll sort of get diarrhea and vomiting. That could be really very unpleasant. But having a strong, healthy gut microbiota can help reduce the risk of picking up these common everyday infections. And obviously that's really, really topical now, as we're talking about the absolute critical importance of us all washing our hands after we go to the loo, before we eat food, after we've touched surfaces, when we come back from the supermarket, and making sure we wash our hands really, really thoroughly. And I spent quite a period of my career working in infectious diseases, and there was a really interesting case where this was many years after I'd stopped working on an infectious diseases unit, and I was in the loo, washing my hands after I'd been to the loo, and one of my colleagues was in one of the cubicles, and she shouted out, "Oh, Stephanie, I need to catch up with you about something." And I thought, how on earth does she know that's me? She's in the cubicle, she can't even see me. She didn't see me come in. I don't really know what's going on here. And I said, hello. I thought I knew who it was. I said, Margaret, how do you know it's me? And she said, well, that's because that is definitely an infectious diseases hand wash that I can hear. So those of us who work in infectious diseases, we're really used to washing our hands really thoroughly and properly. And I think it's just a really important thing to do. So another question I've got for you, and again, I'll put the answer on my page later, is it's so important to understand this concept of risk. And it's massively misunderstood, and it causes a real lack of understanding about things like newspaper headlines. So my question for those of you doing a bit of homeschooling is, what is risk? Okay, so answers on my page, and I'll answer those later. So how can we make our microbiome work better for us? How can we make it stronger? How can we make it healthier? So one simple thing you can do is to have just basically a healthy diet. So a diet that is low in sugars, low in fat, and high in fibre. So that's things like boosting up your intake of whole grains and fruits and vegetables. And it's also important we're starting to learn to have a really varied diet, and particularly to vary the plant foods in your diet. Now, this is a growing area of research that's not entirely conclusive, but there's some really interesting information emerging. So the goal really is to think, how can I have as much variety as possible in terms of the different types of plant food in my diet? So I'm going to set a challenge for all those of you watching today, or those who will watch the recording later. For the next 7 days, what I'd like you to do is pick a day and keep a tally of how many plant foods you eat in that day. So aim to be eating more and more variety of different plant foods each day out of the 7 days. And maybe on the last day, when you've been practicing really hard doing that, count them up and tally them up. So when I say different types, it would be things like spinach, broccoli, Brazil nuts, walnuts. Each of those would be considered a different type of plant. Okay, so when you do that, put a little tally mark down and see how many you get. And the goal really is to try to get above 30. So it'd be really interesting to see how high some of you guys can actually get. I think the highest I got the last time I did this on my Instagram page was 40, and that was me. So I'd like some of you to try and beat me. So please have a good go at that. Now, obviously in these really difficult times, we often find we go to the supermarket and the shelves are a bit bare. And I went into Waitrose the other day and I looked around, and quite literally there was no fresh fruit and vegetables at all. All the shelves were completely bare. Now, obviously, we're hoping that that situation is improving, and certainly it's not like that every day. There were similar problems in Tesco, and it was a bit better a week later when I went. However, it's so important to remember that it doesn't have to be fresh fruit and vegetables. You can include tinned vegetables in water, or tinned fruit in natural juice, and frozen vegetables, because actually frozen vegetables have often got loads more nutrition in them than the fresh vegetables anyway. So I'm a big fan of frozen vegetables, and indeed frozen fruit. So it's fabulous. You can get all those summer fruits and tropical fruits as well, frozen in the supermarket, and you can use them to whip up smoothies and that kind of thing, but also just to have with your breakfast with some porridge or with some yogurt, or just to have as a snack during the day. So they can be really, really good for boosting up the numbers of different types of fruits and vegetables that we're having in the day, and also our total variety of the different number of plant foods that we're having. Now, everyone's pretty familiar with the 5-a-day message. But I would really encourage you to try to think about pushing that a little bit further, because when we look at the science, what the science actually shows is it's more like 8 to 10 a day that we should really be aiming for. So have a go at trying to push up your intake as much as you possibly can, and see if you can get as close to 10 as possible. Okay, what about live yogurt then? So when I talk about a healthy diet and a diet to improve the bugs that live in our gut, most people automatically think of live yogurt as being the most important thing. Now, it's really critical to remember that there are no stringent regulations around things like live yogurts or products that claim to have probiotics in them. So these are these good bugs that are in the products. There are no strict regulations around it. So it might say it has X, Y, or Z bug. Actually, there's nothing to say that it's guaranteed that that bug is present in the product. So it's really important to remember that and to go for things that have been more robustly researched. Now, it's not to say that the other foods don't have these things in it. It's just that there's no guarantee, and there's no guarantee that they have them in the amounts that would be required to be beneficial to health. So it's just important to be aware of that, I think. And the sort of science that we would use to look at which bugs support health, so common everyday illnesses, common infectious diseases, would be something called a randomized controlled trial. So I always try to look up the research and find out which of these products, so which probiotic products have been tested in randomized controlled trials, which of these sort of functional foods, so the yogurts with probiotics in, which of those have been tested in randomized controlled trials, and which of those have been shown to have a benefit in terms of common infectious diseases. So the main ones, it's different for kids and adults, but products that have undergone that sort of research for children include Actimel, so you're looking at trying to have 1 or 2 servings of that. There's a product called Fit for School, a little bit ironic now that we're doing the homeschooling, but Fit for Homeschool, and Ultraflora children's chewable tablets. So Fit for School and the chewable tablets would be 1 a day. They're a little bit difficult to get hold of, and particularly now, and so probably Actimel is the easiest one to get hold of, which is 1 to 2 servings a day that you'd be aiming for. And for adults, the research has been done around things like Actimel and Yakult, but they haven't done the research with Yakult with kids to that level of rigor as yet. Now, please be clear that I'm not saying that all the other products are rubbish. All I'm saying is that we just don't have the evidence yet, so you can't be sure. Whereas with these products, there are a few out there where you can have a little bit more certainty that they have the right amount of bug in to give the beneficial effect for your body. So if you're using any other brands, then please do ask on my page, and I will try to answer all of your questions. So if there are any brands of probiotic yogurts or supplements that you're taking and you want to ask about them and the level of research that has been done around them in relation to common infectious diseases, then do shout out on the page and I will try to answer that information for you. And new research is going on absolutely all the time, and so we get new products added to that list every month, really. Okay, so that's my little whiz through, and I see that some people have just joined, so hopefully they'll be able to watch back the recording. It should pop up on the page a few minutes after we finish. Do get involved in answering those questions, so I'll just whiz back through them again. So for the kids doing the homeschooling, our microbiota, which is all of the organisms that live in our gut, the bacteria, viruses, protozoa, yeasts. How many do you think live in our gut? What is the number? Just a ballpark figure, and we'll see who gets closest to the figure that I've got. And then what really important, oh, actually, I answered that question for you, but for those of you who haven't watched it yet, I will ask it anyway. What really important vitamin does our microbiota make that we tend not to eat an adequate amount of? That's another question. And a tricky one for the GCSE students doing science. Name a chemical that's produced in the gut by fermentation. And the clue is it's short chain fatty acids. So name a chemical that is a short chain fatty acid. And the other question was to define risk, because it's so important that we understand risk. If we don't understand risk, then we're going to really misunderstand the headlines. So I hope that's been helpful to you. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at vital vitamins. So there's a lot of information out there about vitamins that boost up your immune system, but what does the science actually tell us? And I hope to be able to bust a few myths and share a few facts with you tomorrow. So for those of you who joined late, do enjoy watching the recording, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye.